As the eldest child of Mexican immigrants, I was the first person in my family to learn English, and so I became the interpreter. My mother, rest in peace, would ask me to go with her to the many businesses that would often overcharge her, and she would wait for me to let them know that she expected a full refund. I would also interpret for her at meetings with former employers who refused to pay her for hours worked. And again, she would wait for me to let them know that she demanded full payment. I even had to interpret at my own elementary school parent-teacher conferences. And sometimes I even had to tell on myself because now the teachers wanted me to let her know that I often spoke a little bit too much in class. And I was also the interpreter when my mother would challenge why the schools were holding me back in the remedial group when I was clearly outperforming the top students in the class. And although I believe that many of the organizations that we turned to for support truly did have good intentions, the reality was that very few of their programs and services were in our language, and even fewer of their staff looked like us. I've now been working in the nonprofit space for the past 28 years, and currently as the executive director of Cultivando. And even after all of these years, unfortunately, I can say that not much has changed. I continue to see hundreds of individuals and organizations continue to get it wrong. Often, nonprofits set out to help those who they believe to be at risk. And this label is at best patronizing and at worst racist, because we all know what they mean when they say at risk. And the nonprofit industrial complex continues to perpetuate white saviorism when they swoop into our communities to help, yet fail to see the expertise, experience, and leadership that is already there. And even those who want to donate to a good cause can unknowingly contribute to this cycle when they donate their money, but don't see who will be doing the work that they're funding. And for donors and nonprofits alike, this is a missed opportunity to do truly transformational work in our communities. But the good news is, I know of a better model, the promotora model. And anyone who wishes to do truly impactful work in community has a lot to learn from promotoras. Promotoras are people who are trained to provide education, outreach, advocacy, and services in communities that share their backgrounds and lived experiences. A Mexican immigrant who connects other immigrants to medical care or educational opportunities is a promotora. A Congolese refugee who connects other refugees to job placement opportunities or invites them to a parent-teacher conference is acting as a promotora. The word promotora literally means promoter. The model was formalized by Salud y Desarrollo Comunitario de Ciudad Juárez in 1973 to provide medical care and education to marginalized communities in rural areas. The model quickly spread throughout Mexico and Latin America before coming to the United States, where the Centers for Disease Control popularized the model in the 1990s. And the best part about this model is that rather than viewing our community as full of people who need to be saved, we view our community as full of strong and capable leaders. After all, these are the same people who have intelligently navigated the most oppressive systems and policies with incredible resourcefulness and resilience. My mother, through her own advocacy, paved a powerful path for me to follow. And as I think back, I realize my mother was a promotora for me and for our family. Thanks, Mom. And promotoras do incredibly important work wherever they are. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, it became very clear that COVID-19 information and resources were not reaching our state's farm worker population. 75% of our farm workers are Spanish-speaking immigrants. It was also clear that a government representative would not be able to effectively reach farm workers due to the long-standing distrust of government agencies. But we saw this as an opportunity. We decided to go around the state to train community members in our promotora model so that they could provide these needed services to farm workers in their communities. And this project proved to be a huge success. Soon, promotoras were producing informational videos about COVID-19 in Spanish and uploading them on social media and sharing information on WhatsApp. Others would go door to door to deliver food, masks, hand sanitizers, and other needed services. And when vaccines became broadly available, promotoras were amongst the first to get vaccinated, and they shared their experiences with their communities. And this was really important at a time where very little information was reaching the Spanish-speaking community, and when information coming from experts and doctors was not readily embraced in our community. But seeing promotoras share this information and share their experiences motivated people to learn more. Since 2020, the promotoras that we trained around the state were successful in reaching over 2,000 farm workers and thousands of other children and families. But we didn't stop there. Our all-Latina team of promotoras was successful in securing funding to provide monitoring of the pollution coming out of our local Suncor oil refinery, which has been polluting our community for nearly 100 years. And when the impacted community members of Commerce City stated that they did not trust state or local government to protect their health, they turned to us to do the monitoring on their behalf. And although the work that we do focuses on the Spanish-speaking immigrant community, it benefits everyone in our community and in surrounding communities. And one of the best examples of promotoras is our very own Reina, who calls herself a promotora universal, or universal promotora. Reina is a Spanish-speaking immigrant from Mexico who once described herself as a stay-at-home mom who would volunteer from time to time when she wasn't taking care of her husband and children. But rather than sit back and allow discriminatory policies and practices in her city, she decided to do something about it. Reina became a strong and powerful advocate for immigrant rights, education, health equity, and policy change at the state and local level. As a result of Reina's work, she was named Citizen of the Year in Commerce City. And one of my best quotes from Reina is, "We don't just want to fish, we don't just want to learn how to fish. We want to acquire the whole river so that we can feed everyone." Promotoras are truly the leaders we have been waiting for. And the promotora model represents an anti-racist, pro-immigrant, pro-woman approach to community transformation. And it's one of the best ways that institutions can begin to rebuild trust after decades and decades of systemic racism and neglect. And by employing members of underrepresented communities, institutions can also begin to lessen some of the racial biases that have prevented them from appreciating our community's ability to create truly equitable and accessible services. So if you're a nonprofit or community-based organization, I challenge you to work with community. Don't just create a dependency on your services. Be an ally and work with us to address the root causes that lead people to your organization in the first place. Too often, organizations with good intentions who provide food and shelter rarely get involved in efforts to address low wages or to advocate for truly affordable housing. And yet if they did that, they would significantly reduce or eliminate the need for their services in the first place. And if you do work with community, by all means, pay them. Too often we're expected to do the work without any kind of compensation. And funding typically goes to larger mainstream organizations who just turn around and ask us to help them because they don't know how to work effectively in our communities. Basically, they get all the money, we get to do all of the real work. A more equitable approach would be to fund local, community-led organizations directly. And along those lines, if you do decide to donate your money to a nonprofit organization, take a look at their team. If they claim to be working in the Indigenous community, are Indigenous people reflected on their staff, on their board, in leadership roles? If the answer is no, then perhaps you should give your money elsewhere. And not just because we should reward organizations who work alongside their target communities, but because they're going to do a better job. Indigenous people are in a better position to tell you what Indigenous people want and need. Immigrants can better tell you what they need in order for their families to thrive. It just makes sense. And lastly, I challenge you to rethink your idea of what a qualified and professional person looks like. Too often we value degrees over someone's actual lived experience. We value English proficiency over those who speak English as a second language or who speak with beautiful accents. And we erroneously assume that immigrants are not capable of doing the work required. And yet through all of these examples, I've clearly demonstrated to you how promotoras, who are predominantly Spanish-speaking immigrant women, have a proven track record of getting the job done. And so I invite all of you to join me in continuing to elevate the important work that promotoras do in all of our communities. And in the words of Reina, may we all continue to work together to acquire that river for everyone. Gracias.